So, welcome.
Thank you.
And this is our first conversation in Community of Peace that we're videotaping. And so, Annette, you and I have talked a little bit. We've known each other for a number of years. And it seems that a particular theme keeps coming up in terms of our conversation and our life, really. And it's the theme of lament, of grief, and the divine feminine. Is that fair to say? Yeah. So I thought tonight we would just talk about these things. And we have just come out of a beautiful ritual that you helped us, guided us through. And we're very grateful for that. So thank you. And in that ritual, we experienced both gratitude and grief. And you led us, the divine feminine. And you set up a space in the center that was beautiful, that was circular, that was candlelit, and that had elements of nature in it. So maybe that's a good place to begin. Okay. Tell us a little bit about that ritual that we just went through. What was that like for you, and anything at all about that?
Yeah, well, I think I myself have experienced the beauty and the power of ritual in community with others. And I have, when thinking about how could we honor both our gratitude and our grief, I always think that ritual ought to be embodied, which is also a very feminine concept, right? The masculine often is enlightenment, going up and out, and the feminine is very connected to the body and the earth. And so bringing in those elements of stones from the creek down below.
Right. The land that we live on.
From the land itself.
Right.
As a symbol of the grounding of gratitude, that this is where we begin, because our hearts hold both great love, which is where gratitude stems from, and also from great love is where our grief stems from. And Joanna Macy has been one of my teachers as far as I've read her work and followed her and over the years, and she talks about the importance of grounding ourselves in gratitude, because it gets us in touch with our deepest love. What do you most love about the world? So we took those rocks from the land. We each had a turn to pick up a rock and name what we love in our world, what we're most grateful for, and to place those in the center of a bowl.
So we involved our bodies in the ritual, not just our minds.
Absolutely.
Right.
Which is really important to ritual,
Yeah.
I think. And then we moved into a time of honoring our grief through the element of water. And everyone had a chance to name what is breaking your heart today. And some of those griefs that we mentioned were on the personal, individual level, and many of them were on the larger collective human scale, and even maybe global, cosmic scale. And then we poured water onto the stones in that bowl.
What did the water represent?
The water represented our tears, and kind of that common well of tears that Francis Weller, another teacher on grief that I've been following, talks about, this common well that what every one of us experiences grief and loss in some sort of way, and that we need rituals and spaces to empty it out, to literally shed with tears or shed with words our grief, and that there's real power when that is being witnessed by a group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the way you had us witness it tonight was very gentle, with hand on the heart,
Yeah.
right? How do you express what we expressed tonight in your daily life? How does that happen in terms of the regular grief, gratitude, the connection with the Divine Feminine? How does that express itself in your life?
Well, I think in a few different ways. I've begun a personal practice in the morning. Now, this is a borrowed practice from some indigenous cultures, the 7 Directions prayer. So, and I actually, I wish I could name which native group that would be, but I don't know off the top of my head at the moment. But I go out in the morning in bare feet and I stand on the ground and I just welcome the 4 directions. I turn to the north, the south, the east, and the west. And it's my time to really just notice and tap into my love for the beings and even the peoples, you know, in the places of the world, north, south, east, and west. And then I put my hands on the earth to honor my connection to our Mother Earth. And then the next direction is to wild spirit above, and then I welcome my soul, why I'm here and who I am.
You welcome your own soul.
Yes,
Right.
yes. And that is a way I feel like that keeps me grounded in my gratitude for all of that life and the world. But grief is something that is, it's been a long journey of learning how to carry.
Mm-hmm.
And actually wrote a children's book about it.
All right.
And it starts with an old man who's trying to carry the world and all of its troubles on his shoulders. And eventually the world's just too heavy for him to carry, and it breaks and falls into 1,000 pieces, and a little child comes along, a little girl who comes and picks up one piece. And she tells the old man she's going to help carry the world in her heart. And she takes one piece home.
Mm-hmm.
She has a dream, and that dream informs her of her love for the world.
Yeah.
And so
What's
my
the name of the book?
It's called Carry.
Carry.
Carry, C-A-R-R-Y.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. But I tell people I wrote that book first for myself,
Right.
because I often feel like the old man, and I can notice if I'm feeling really heavy for the world, it takes residence often in my shoulders, right? And I start feeling this, I have to do something, what am I responsible, you know. But my practice now is when I experience, let's say, something on the news that is just overwhelming to me, or a personal grief or loss, I practice literally letting it into my heart and letting my heart break. And that usually means touching into some grief and shedding a lot of tears. And then I ask, what is mine to do, if anything?
What is mine to do?
What is mine to do?
What can I do today?
Yes. Yes. It's my practice.
So you speak a lot about the connection between grief and gratitude.
Yeah.
And you mentioned gratitude as a grounding thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I listen to you speak, I hear you say, gratitude is a grounding thing, especially when it's witnessed, especially when it's expressed among other people. Is that fair to say?
Grief and gratitude
Grief
when
and
expressed.
gratitude.
Yeah.
Okay.
With others.
So, how can we, those of us who gather with other people, begin to practice this more, to experience this more? Because we all, I think, long to be grounded, right?
Yeah.
To feel that rootedness in our lives. How can we do it in our churches?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
I mean, I think a very simple way to begin is we can do this on one-on-one conversations. We can do this when we're listening to another. So often we feel we have to do something to fix them. When most often the best thing we can do is put a hand to a heart. I do this a lot, literally, because it reminds me I'm bearing witness to you. I'm bearing witness to what you've shared. And when I do that, then I'm connected to my heart instead of up here trying to figure out how I should respond.
Right.
Because this is usually wiser than my head. But I think we can do this also, in churches or communities, even a regular practice of coming together and doing a simple ritual like we did tonight, and just giving space for people to share. What is your joy? What is your grief? What breaks your heart? And again, just that practice of deep listening. It's often all someone needs is to know I've been heard, I've been seen, I'm not alone in this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the great experiences for many people was to meet Brother Roger Kuntze, who had a real ministry of listening, right? And very often he would say, as he listened to someone, he would discern what it was that was blocking them, right? And he was very good at it. So I guess my question for you is, as we do this work of expressing grief and gratitude, what do you find blocks us from entering into that good work? What keeps us from doing it?
A lot of times I think, especially when we're talking about grief, there's a fear. Many people will say, I'm afraid to go there. I can't let myself go there. There's a fear that our hearts will break and never be put back together.
Right, we'll fall apart.
We'll fall apart.
Shatter in 1,000 pieces.
But yes, I think there's a great fear of the pain of grief. And yet, it's my personal experience with my own losses and tending to my grief. It's also watching others tend to their grief, that those that let their hearts break open, they find they don't fall into 1,000 pieces. They actually just grow wider.
Right. Isn't that something that Francis Weller said in terms of as the heart breaks open? How did he put it? Do you remember?
He talks about capacity. Right. Our capacity grows.
That we can embrace
more love and more grief.
Right.
That those who tend to their personal grief, actually, it's like a muscle. I mean, our heart is literally a muscle. So the capacity grows to hold more of collective grief for one another. We can listen then better to one another. We can hold the grief of the world. We have more capacity for love.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe my last question, although I can't promise my last question, is this. As we're talking about grief, gratitude, the expression of it, the witnessing of it, the communal aspect of it, how does the divine feminine fit into all this? How do you see that happening? How do you desire for that to happen? The divine feminine, what would you say?
I mean, it's very personal to my own life, because the divine feminine has become my image for the mystery we call God. And that came around the same time that I experienced the loss of my brother. And somehow imagining God as mother, just, even though I have also a good relationship with my father, there's something about the motherly, intuitive presence of just being held. Like literally just going in my imagination and allowing the Divine Mother to hold me I have a painting that I came across. It's called Compassion, and it's this painting of a woman holding the earth. And then if you look at it long enough, you notice there's another set of arms holding the woman as she holds her love and grief for the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they're motherly hands, they're
Mm-hmm.
maternal hands, they're compassionate hands. And, you know, mothers, women, there's something about this like nurturing presence that I think is not just, it's not even a female thing, it's a you know, because the divine is neither but both. It's more of the feminine energy
Mm-hmm.
that both men and women can experience and can have within them, and but we need more of that. We need more of those nurturing
Mm-hmm.
Spaces and practices, I think, to welcome to welcome our grief and our gratitude. And I think that embodiment piece of like, you know, how many of us can say, oh yeah, I know I'm loved, or I know this, or I know that. I can intellectually understand what's going on in the world, but until we feel it in our bodies,
Right.
which again is a very feminine thing,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we're fully alive.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good way to say it. And so the divine feminine
Mhm.
expresses it for you in terms of the imaginative
Yeah.
world of the feminine embracing the world.
Mhm.
And in terms of our practical everyday lives and even culture and history, it's clear that for millennia it's been the women in ancient cultures that have carried grief from the moment of birth of their children through the death of people in the village. So they were the ones who carried it, who led, who guided people in the expression of what we did tonight. Right? And it's just something to me that today, 2024, seems so right
Yeah.
about that. You know, as you were guiding us through tonight, I felt a great relief. You know, it was almost like, it reminded me of when I was in Palestine and we had just been bombed in the refugee camp, and the women stepped up
Yeah.
and led us spontaneously
Yeah.
in an outpouring of grief. It wasn't the men, you know.
Mhm.
So while it seems like, you know, there's both male and feminine in everyone,
Yeah.
it seems like the women of this world just naturally have the capacity, perhaps even more than us men, to intuit and intuitively guide through this womb to tomb life.
Yes.
How does that work out, practically speaking, for you? And I know I don't want to put you on the spot here, but in the time that you've been here, what, 5 days now?
Mhm.
Okay.
Something like that.
I mean, I think I've shared with you already that, you know, I asked you at one point, have you considered becoming a priest? Right? And because I see you as priest, someone who guides, who shepherds, who leads, but in a way that is very deep and of the heart. So how does all this happen in your life? How do you see it unfolding?
Well, I noticed for a while that people feel safe with me. And I've had great teachers. I had a mother who knew how to embody that deep listening presence of people in her presence. They felt seen. I have this relationship, I'll call it, with a weeping beech tree that's a sheltering tree, and I hold that actually as an image for myself. I think of her as a great ancient grandmother that just knows how to hold. And so I'm not an ordained priest or priestess necessarily, though, but I do companion others through the practice of spiritual direction. And I sit with people and I just hold space. You know, I don't guide them. It's not for me to fix them, but there's power in that holding space. And I see myself as someone, I'm a gatherer in my community, my home community, and I have gathered, invited others, specifically women, into places of tending to our grief.
Right. It's really interesting what you're saying, because you're touching on something that, again, for centuries and centuries has been the practice. From woman to woman, from mother to daughter, from sister to sister, from the feminine to the feminine. This passing down of capacity, of leadership. And you just mentioned it, your mother, right? Yeah. Do you find yourself led to guide women in this practice?
Yes, most specifically, that's what I've done. Yes. Yeah. In fact, when I spent a week on the island of Iona back in April, with the community of Iona, the Abbey, and as I walked that sacred land, which I do believe is sacred, if anyone has been there, I was asking a lot about what does community look like for me in this next season of my life, and what rose up for me at that time was gather the sisters. And so I've done that. I've been meeting with a small group of women friends in sisterhood, and we're talking about expanding that, and wanting to do more work with women on around some archetypes of women and of the divine, because I do think there's a lot that's been out of balance with masculine and feminine. We've lived for centuries now with masculine qualities being elevated, and when they're out of balance, they become toxic or they become unhealthy. And so I believe we're in a time where the feminine is trying to restore balance with the masculine qualities. And I very much want to be part of that embodiment of the divine feminine and calling women into that.
I don't think there's any worries or any doubt you are part of it, and emerging into leadership of your own, so that's a good thing to see. Is there anything you wanted to add to this before we close?
Just gratitude for inviting me into this shared ritual space. It happened rather organically, but also realizing, this is what you talk about, the feminine leading people in lament, and and it felt very good to be a part of that in this community of peace. And so thank you for that.
We are grateful, truly, for your being here and for sharing what you have with us. And I think what has begun here in Community of Peace is now a beginning ritual that will continue. So thank you for that.
Thank you.